RPGs with mechanics where social relationships can impact the outcome of the game have become increasingly popular in recent years. From Western RPGs where social bonds really change the story, to JRPGs that include life sim and dating sim elements like the Persona series, these games have provided an interesting twist on the genre and are even becoming something of a subgenre in itself. Eternights promises to bring both action RPG dungeon crawling and a dating sim in a horrific post-apocalyptic setting. But how does it live up to that promise? Before we get into that, I think we live up to our promise here at I Dream of Indie Games of bringing a voice to the voiceless, and hopefully you see value in us too. Head on over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames if you want to help us defeat the gaming echo chamber, gain access to our Discord, and tons of other exclusive perks. Your community is waiting. In Eternights, players will control a protagonist who is a young man that's in search of love, but instead finds himself fighting for survival as a catastrophic event changes the world and threatens to bring it to an end. People have suddenly started transforming into crazed, monstrous beings, and huge walls have formed, sectioning off different areas, preventing travel beyond them. Humans who have remained unchanged are directed to head into designated shelters to increase their chances of survival. The protagonist and his best friend Shania head to a shelter and soon meet other survivors, but this safety is short-lived as the shelter is soon raided. Without giving away too much, our protagonist's right arm is cut off, his life is saved by a godlike creature Lux, and Umbra, the real villain of our story, is eventually revealed. Again, I don't want to go too much into spoiler territory, it's kind of tough with this game, but in typical RPG fashion, you will eventually form a party outside of you and Shania. You'll have Yuna, a pop idol who's been given healing abilities and power over fire, Sia, a scientist who's given power over ice, Min, an athlete who's able to create protective shields and is given power over lightning, and Johan, an immortal being who's able to increase the stats of your character. The gameplay consists of going on missions to destroy walls so that you can recover the stone that you need in order to defeat the evil Umbra, and also build up social relationships and stats in between missions. Each wall mission will involve exploring a dungeon to reach the wall's core in order to destroy it, and players will encounter numerous enemies as well as puzzles and even some mini-games that must be overcome, and of course you have boss encounters. The combat includes both fast attacks that do a small amount of damage and slower attacks that do larger damage, and there are combos that can be ended with a more powerful attack as well. Successfully attacking will charge up a gauge that will allow for powerful elemental attacks that can strike enemy weaknesses, and successfully completing combos will fill up the gauge much faster than regular attacks. Some enemies also have elemental barriers that must be broken before they can receive damage, and these must be broken by elemental attacks that strike their weakness. But wait, yes, there's more. The elemental attacks will also trigger some quick-time events that will unleash unblockable combos if successfully completed, and these can be used both to break elemental barriers and do massive amounts of damage to enemies. Another way to fill up the elemental gauge is through performing perfect dodges, in which the player must press the dodge roll button immediately after a flash above the enemy when it begins an attack. Successfully performing a perfect dodge will also temporarily grant invulnerability and slow down the movement of enemies, so it also grants an opportunity to pull off a combo without enemies being able to hit you. Rather than gaining additional power through experience points, the protagonist's stats can be increased and extra combat abilities can be gained through both increasing social bonds with characters and with using essences that can be obtained in the game. Black essences can be used to give your character certain kinds of abilities, and they can be obtained through enemy drops or found in dungeons while exploring as well. White essences can boost stats and give additional abilities and are obtained through doing side quests with specific characters that you're bonding with. Eternights progresses using a calendar system, and a certain number of days will be available in which a dungeon must be completed. Each day is divided into day and night sections, and certain activities are only available depending on the time of day. During the daytime, you can choose to explore a dungeon, you can spend time with another character to bond with them, or do training with another character to boost a specific stat. During the night, you can also go on scavenging side quests with another character that can boost stats and earn you white essences, or do training with another character. In addition to combat stats, you also have social stats, and these must be at a certain level before certain bonding events are available with other characters. These social stats can be obtained through choosing certain dialogue options as well as through training events with other characters. The quickest way to boost these is through training them with the assistance of Shania, and you can train with him during the day or night. Boosting your relationships with other characters is organized into ranks, and certain abilities and bonding events depend on having at least a certain relationship rank with a character. Ranks 1 through 5 are are ranks of platonic relationships, and entering rank 6 involves entering a romantic relationship with a character. Getting to rank 7 unlocks a special ability and also adds more bonding options. You can get up to rank 5 with Chennai and up to rank 7 with Yuna, Sia, Min, and Johan. And while you can enter a romantic relationship with more than one character, who you choose to date and how many you choose to date will impact the story, so take that into consideration. While the characters and writing in Eternights can be rather anime tropey, the game does still manage to make everyone pretty likable and interesting. The writing gives the story a good balance of comedy and tragedy. What makes this game work so well is really kind of difficult to describe in words because its charm has to be experienced to be fully appreciated. Eternights has a lot of heart, and that combined with the fun of the gameplay is what makes it something more than the sum of its parts. The visual presentation of the game has to be the weakest element, unfortunately, but it's also not bad. It's just not something that's going to make it stand out from other titles. The character portraits could be better, they're adequate enough to function in the game, and the backgrounds are also decent, but not much more than that. However, what the game does have going for it visually is the atmosphere in the dungeons. While they are visually very, very dark, that does help in creating tension in not knowing what could be around the next corner. Enemies can sneak up out of the shadows, and that element of suspense adds a nice horror vibe to the game that does feed into the overall atmosphere. As for the soundtrack, it's pretty nice and mostly consists of darker electronic music that fits the mood well, with some more upbeat tunes occasionally for those lighthearted moments. I'd say the soundtrack is at its best in the dungeons, where it mixes well with the dark look of the game and does add to that atmosphere once again.
Yes!
The voice acting is pretty good, and the majority of the dialogue in the game is voiced. All of the characters are paired with voice actors that do a great job of presenting their personalities, and that helps in making the characters rather memorable. You do have a variety of difficulty options here, so players of different skill levels can likely find a comfortable way to play. That being said, some of the core features of the combat, like performing perfect dodges, successfully completing combos, and succeeding in the quick-time events for elemental attacks, are necessary to learn to do well in order to progress in the game, and there might be some players who will struggle with that on any difficulty setting. While I think it's pretty easy to do once you've learned the basics of gameplay, there are still some folks who just don't connect with that style of play and will find it a bit frustrating, so keep that in mind when determining whether this game is for you. Overall, I found Ethernights to be a joy to play from beginning to end, and I frequently found myself smiling at it because I was just having such a dang good time. It'll probably take somewhere between 16 to 18 hours to complete, and all of that time was pretty well spent. While I did kind of hope the game would have been a bit longer, that wasn't because it was lacking, but because I was having such a great time with it that I didn't want it to come to an end. So I'm very happy to award Eternights a Golden Genie Lamp of Approval. This is for providing such a fun and charming experience filled with horror, romance, and even bromance. If you're someone who's into both action RPGs and dating sims, then I strongly recommend giving it a try. Thank you.